Hey, everyone, welcome. So much has happened since I was last with you, and I am here today with attorney turned farmer John Klar. Welcome, Mr. Klar, or John, as you have told me I can call you.
Thank you for having me, Doctor, or Naomi, as you've told me time and time.
You can call me Naomi. Yes, you can. Well, I'm excited to have you on our show today, and everyone should tune in because what John is working on is very much relevant to a number of fights that we're having right now, a number of issues in the news. Attorney turned farmer John Klar studied literature and political science at the University of Connecticut and focused on international tax and environmental law at UConn School of Law. He's worked as a tax advisor in Hartford and in Birmingham, UK, before operating a litigation practice in Storrs, Connecticut for 7 years. In 1998, John developed persistent and intense muscle pain that eventually became nearly totally disabling. I'm so sorry to read this. He was diagnosed with chronic fibromyalgia, but only years later realized he suffered from chronic Lyme disease. He was forced to close his practice and move with his wife, Jacqueline, to northeastern Vermont in 1999, where the couple bought a 160-acre former dairy farm and began learning animal husbandry. John manages his fibromyalgia with regular farming exercise and whole foods. He began writing commentaries for various periodicals and now writes regularly for Mother Earth News, American Thinker, and Vermont's True North Reports. This is a very interesting quote. Joel Salatin, the distinguished farmer activist, notes in a forward to Small Farm Republic that Klar is an avowed conservative and finds himself politically aligned with Republicans, but he's embarrassed by both parties' failure to understand the practical environmental, economic, and social contributions of small family farms and local food systems. So tell me what is top of your agenda today, John.
Well, the top of my agenda, and thank you for that story, because that's Maha now, by the way. I think my book has helped influence that conversation. And
Sure.
we have conservatives trying to clean up local farms and our food supplies. I'm pretty excited about that, and I'm part of that. But the main reason I had asked you to consider me for today is that, as you note in my story, I had pretty much retired from practicing law, but I've maintained my admission. My health has improved a bit over the years, a lot of it having to do with diet, I will say. And this past summer here in Vermont, a case came down from a Vermont Supreme Court, which horrified me. It's one of the, if not the worst decisions I've ever read. It's one of them. And the local council's not admitted to the United States Supreme Court. I have remained admitted to the U.S. Supreme Court, so I agreed to take the case. And it's called the Palatella case, we call it for short. And this involved a 6-year-old Vermont public school student who was administered an experimental COVID vaccine against his parents' express wishes. They actually went into school a couple of days beforehand to make sure he wouldn't be vaccinated. And despite his protests, the wrong name tag was put on his arm and he was jabbed. And when they complained, they were dismissed. And our governor had actually offered cash awards from COVID funds to public schools based on rates of vaccination.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I since have another potential client who reports their child receiving the same experience the same day in the same clinic. So we're trying to explore whether this is not a one-off, but actually a pattern. But in any event, I agreed to take the case to the United States Supreme Court. The writ of certiorari, the petition for writ of certiorari is pending.
What that means to a non-legal
Yes,
audience?
thank you. Jurisdictionally and procedurally, when one is upset with a state Supreme Court's decision, the next step is directly to the United States Supreme Court by virtue of what's called a writ of certiorari. There are about 7,000 to 8,000 filed each year, and the Supreme Court then has the discretion and a process based upon which they will decide which cases to hear. So we're at that stage where we're still battling to hopefully get the court to hear this case. And there are other similar cases coming up around the country, but this seems to be the first one that has been filed with the U.S. Supreme Court.
So I wish that I could be more shocked than I am. Like, I'm so shocked, but shocking things like this, unfortunately, are part of our time. This is truly horrific. So just to restate what I think I heard you explain, there are two different confirmed minors, little ones, like 6-year-old is one, and I don't know the age of the other, um, in the state of Vermont, whose parents specifically said, do not vaccinate my child. And they were vaccinated against the parents' wishes with the mRNA injection, which is experimental and we now know very dangerous, if not sometimes lethal, in the same clinic in Vermont. And there was a cash incentive for the schools to do this. Is that what you're telling me? Is that correct?
You've got it, only with the proviso that although the parents of the second child are adamant that this happened to them as well, we are investigating to make sure they had not inadvertently filed a consent and they forgot because it was a few years ago. But they also promptly, immediately took their child out of the school and put them in a private school where they
Wow.
felt safer. Yeah.
What did the administration or the teachers or whoever was the personnel on site who did this, what did they say to the parents when the parents said, I did not give permission for you to do this to my child?
Well, the vice principal of the school and others subsequently apologized, but we don't really know what exactly happened. They were one of the reasons our clients were so upset is that the school couldn't explain how it happened, couldn't say who was responsible for it, and then when state counsel Ron Ferrara brought the suit, they never got to trial to find out. There are Jane Doe's and John Doe's number 2, 3, and 4, whatever, who were clinic workers. And so this family has never got to the trial stage where they could actually interview the witnesses and find out how the name tag got switched, how you could have made this egregious error while the child was proclaiming, I'm not supposed to get jabbed. No, no. And they
Oh
distracted
my,
him with a stuffed animal, jabbed him. And of course, he felt horrible when he went home. He felt he
oh
had
no,
done something wrong.
how awful, how traumatic. Well, that's really interesting because it would suggest that who, the school system, the governor, the state governor, is concealing the identities of the people who actually go. Was this physically in the school that this happened, or were the kids taken to some third party?
It was physically in the public school, and I wouldn't accuse the governor of concealing anything, but I would accuse the Vermont Supreme Court of
Mhm.
concealing it procedurally by virtue of deciding that the Federal PrEP Act preempted any state law claim. So that wouldn't matter if it was a negligent or a deliberate vaccination of our client. We are
Right,
never allowed to proceed to trial, and we were told the sole recourse is against through the federal process under the PrEP Act, which requires a showing both of a willful injection and serious bodily injury or death. And we are not alleging harm, nor was a pharmaceutical representative sued. This isn't about a product liability case. This is about parental rights,
right,
informed consent, long-standing rights, both state and federal, that were just completely eclipsed by what I believe is an obscene construction of preemption, because the statute, the PrEP Act, does not, by its terms, say that you're going to lose your parents' rights.
right. No, it does not.
So, yeah.
Well, these are two giant things that I want to just spend a little time unpacking. I first want to go back to this question of who are these people who did this? How did they get access? Who who funded them? And part of why I'm interested in this is that I've seen in the 990s, which are disclosure forms for 501c3s, which are nonprofits,
Yep.
uh, from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I'm not saying they're the ones, but this seems to be a model. A lot of funding of people who are not in the public school system, but they're placed in the public school system by these unaccountable nonprofits. And in the case of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, they clearly have a conflict of interest because Bill Gates is, invested in the vaccines. So that's so scary to me because when your child goes to a school counselor, there's an effort for third parties to set up medical clinics in schools to give your child counseling about transgender issues, for instance, or even prescribed birth control. These people are not accountable to the school system and thus to the parents and the school board which the parents elect, the way that people in the public school system are accountable. So it is very worrying to me that the people who did this, their identities are concealed. That means the whole paper trail of the funding and the agreements and the contracts is also concealed. Do you have any sense of who these people are? Was it the school nurse? Was it strangers that no one had seen before? What was the description of these people? What was the setup? Was it an auditorium? Was it a classroom? Is there a clinic in the school? Like, just tell me in very granular detail, like who, what, where, when happened, let's say to the first 6-year-old, okay? The first child who's 6.
Sure. And again, as I profess my ignorance, I will say it's because it's a procedurally imposed ignorance. We're not allowed to find out. And we
Wait, you're
are.
not representing the parents?
Well, no, we can ask the parents only know so much what they learned from their 6-year-old, but we
Well,
haven't been
it's
able.
the child. It's the child. The child is the only witness you've been able to talk to.
Yeah.
That's so awful.
Well, that's why I'm grateful for you having me here because it's on their behalf that I want to tell their story because the court said we can't tell their story. We can't even find out what their story is. And I do know what 990s are as a tax attorney, and I know exactly what you're talking about. I have similar suspicions. I've been presenting on various fora around the country, and I'm finding more and more of these stories. I actually have another case out of Boston with a 3-year-old. I'm hearing reports around the country, and we may be doing some advertising to ask people to call us if their children have been vaccinated with anything against
Right.
their wishes. By the way, if this was a DPT vaccine, we'd be allowed to proceed. This is exclusive to an admittedly experimental vaccine.
Right. Of course.
So
Yeah.
from what we do know, there were volunteers.
Mhm.
Apparently, one of the physicians administering these shots was actually a former physician of this child
Oh,
and
God.
subsequently recognized him. They were taken out of the classroom, which is also a little bit extraordinary. This whole thing, of course, was extraordinary.
Mhm.
They were taken out of the classroom, I believe, by volunteers. We don't have their names. Uh,
Volunteers, what does that even mean? Who are they? Could be pedophiles, they could be criminals. Like, who are the volunteers who are handling the children? As a mother, this is horrific. What volunteers? You know, in most cases, even if you're a parent these days, you need to sign in, sign out to bring your child their homework if they left it at home. You know, who are the volunteers? Do you know?
We don't. And again, these are does number one, number two, number three, number four. If you read the complaint, we don't know. We're not allowed to find out.
Oh my God.
20 some years ago here in Vermont, when our 12-year-old called from the local school because he had a headache, or the nurse did, and my wife, who's an RN, said, well, please give him some Tylenol. They said, we can't do that. Come get him.
Right.
Now, just so we can shock you some more, because I've had many Vermonters say, if they did this to my child, I would take a shotgun to them. And some of us, and this family did not, but it was very traumatizing for them. There's a video out there that we created of the mom, who is a Taiwanese immigrant. Her English is a little sketchy. She's so brave. She's so wonderful. But she was in tears. She felt like it was a second injury when she went to the school for explanations and was given none and was treated horribly, she feels. She's
Oh
not
my.
allowed to testify about that, though. She's not allowed to tell that story in court. And
Well,
then
she can tell it in court, but she can tell it on this platform. And you,
finally, yes.
yeah.
And that's why we created the video, because she's not really prepared to come into shows like this. And that's why I speak on her behalf. And actually, she's in Taiwan right now visiting family. But the third injury to me and to her is
But
when the
can we,
court, yes,
just
ma'am.
before, I know that you're representing your clients beautifully, I just want to go back to what actually happened. So,
Sure.
did the principal acknowledge that there were volunteers who took the children out of the classroom? And where did they take them to? To where did they take them? Where was this physically taking place?
Well, now, yeah, now we would have to go to Ron Ferrara, who has fully researched this. I'm at the appellate level, so I'm really looking at the preemption law and focused on the laws. So I don't want to misstate. So
Right.
I've given you what I believe generally is what happened. I do know, according to the complaint in its terms, that he was removed from the classroom. He had another child's arm tag on, another child's name on his arm. And so when you have pharmacists being given cash awards for COVID vaccines, doctors being given cash awards for recommending COVID vaccines, and now public schools with an incentive. Apparently, the vice principal also said he was to the father that he was disappointed that there weren't higher vaccination rates. And the father also, when he went in 2 days earlier and said, "Look, we're going to bring Leo to school, or should we bring Leo to school on Thursday?" I think it was 2 days later We're worried he might get vaccinated. We're not really anti-vax. We just don't think a young child needs to be taking something that's experimental. Oh no, he will be fine. He will be fine. So this just adds insult to injury, of
They
course.
went in advance in person to make sure this would not happen to their
Yes, ma'am.
child, and
Yes, ma'am.
their requests were completely ignored. It sounds very dodgy that the wrong child's name was on this child's wrist. Okay, so you don't know physically where they took them, but it could have been an office or a some location in the school. They weren't removed
It
from the
it
school.
was yes, it was another location within the school, I can say that much, where they had set it up. I don't know which exact room it was or how it was oriented. Again, some of that we're just not able to find out except through the 6-year-old, now 8-year-old. And remember, I mean, your listeners should know this is a state where transgender hormones are administered to minor children without parental consent. The consent forms can be signed by the child at University of Vermont Medical Center with all of the lists of hazards, potentially horrifying lists, by the way,
I did
without the
I
parent
did
ever knowing.
I did not know that in Vermont, uh, transitioning hormones can be administered to a child without your consent. That is going to be one of the great scandals and horrors, in the history books when people look back on this time. So there's a lot of comment, and I'll read the comments in just a minute, but let me now drill down into um, your litigation, your cause of action. So you're not, as I understood it, and I have kind of read through the PrEP Act, and I understand it. What it does is creates a very narrow window of what you need to do to bring an action against the manufacturers. Basically, gives it impunity, the manufacturers of vaccines specifically, and it limits the ability to get a major compensation. Is that all correct? So you're not going through the PrEP Act. You're not causing. You're not alleging harm. This is about parental rights. So say more about that. Like, what does your lawsuit actually say is the tort here? If I'm using the right word, is the wrong, is the damage that was done?
Yes, the tort is the right word. We are alleging harm. We're just not alleging harm by the vaccines. This isn't about whether the vaccines are safe or effective. Who knows? Leo may eventually develop some problems or myocarditis, but
God
heaven
forbid.
forbid we disparage the mighty vaccines. However, this is about parental rights. There were, I believe, 8 counts in tort for various violations of state actions, including under the state constitution, and including specifically a battery claim. Now, battery does not require a showing of intent. So if I jab you in the arm with a needle, I have
Mhm.
committed a battery. We hear of assault and battery. Assault is the threat part. Battery is the physical intrusion. And by
Right.
definition, at common law, this is actionable. And it would allow potentially punitive damages, but also, for instance, claims for infliction of emotional distress. All of those are being foreclosed. You can't do that under the PrEP Act. It has to be, you got to die. And of course, as you probably know, you have to exhaust all of your own medical and other remedies before you recover. And the backup is huge for the vaccine injured, and the recoveries are minute. But we're not looking for that. We're looking for the school officials to be held accountable for gross breaches of fiduciary duty to honor. Not just This wasn't just a vaccination without parental consent. This was a vaccination against very
Against
specific
specific.
parental
Right.
directions. And so the conclusion of the court is that any such actions, you can't go anywhere else but the feds. And again, it's not in the PrEP Act. And this has raised the issue of whether you could actually force jab children under some Gatesian clinic, perhaps, and be held accountable. Now, I've written in some articles deliberately dangling this worm out there that the effect of this decision would be to allow Vermont schools and other states that some are finding similarly, to force vaccinate a child against parents' wishes with absolute impunity unless they die. And then I was challenged by USA Today, Associated Press, Snopes, saying, no, the fact checkers checked this, doctor.
Mhm.
No, this is not true. And they quoted Vermont Law School president. And I've challenged him and said, well, how can you say that? Can you give me any construction of a pattern?
Mr. Sklar,
Sure.
John, let me interrupt. I'm going to ask you to really slow down because everything you're saying here is very important. We want to follow it closely. Um, So it's very important and notable that you're saying USA Today and Snopes and AP contacted you today. Is that correct?
No, no, they each. I only actually was contacted by AP, but if you look, actually, I have an article out on this with Brownstone
I see.
Institute,
Okay,
and it
so
shows it documents they ran a national. And sorry, I get excited and I'm trying to fit
yeah,
everything
let's
in
take
a
a deep
minute.
breath because this is
So
really important. Go
slow
ahead.
down. I can do it. My wife's usually here to calm me. Um, the the impact of this decision is, I hold firmly, and I understand the law thoroughly,
Mhm.
to prevent accountability for a direct and deliberate forced jab intrusion into into parents' rights and children's rights, because these
Right.
are both. So these are both parental rights to make a decision,
Mhm.
and the patient's rights through the parent to have informed consent.
Right.
And the effect of this decision very much would allow that to happen. And the national media has tried to jump out and say that's not true. The fact checkers are
So
exactly wrong. It's
I'm not,
misinformation.
okay, I need you to now stop and let me try to understand exactly what you're saying. Just because you're a very brilliant lawyer and I'm not a lawyer, so I need to understand exactly what's in play here. So you're saying that if your lawsuit is successful, then it would do something that AP said is not true? What is it that you said is true that AP and Snopes is saying is not true? This is very important. You should take it as a compliment and not be defensive. They only send AP out to fact check someone if you're over the target, and AP is in a memorandum of understanding with Xinhua, which is the Chinese Communist Party's um, news agency. And as my reporting has revealed, the CCP manufactured at least the Pfizer vaccine. So this is a big conflict. And it for Reuters, I mean, just to throw that in, the chairman of the board was also a Pfizer uh, chair or on the board. So huge conflicts in bed with pharma. Let me go back to what you said would happen when and what did they say was not true? Okay? Because I don't
Yes.
understand.
Yes. No, no, thank you. I'm glad for our viewers as well. I want people to understand that's why I'm here.
Okay,
When I
just
took this,
yeah.
yeah, when I took the case, I was outraged. So backing up a bit. So this doesn't have to do with the outcome in the Supreme Court. It has to with the US Supreme Court. It has to do with the impact of this Vermont decision for all Vermont residents. And
When you say this Vermont decision, do you mean in the future if your lawsuit is successful at the state level?
well, so Vermont Supreme Court is our last court of refuge unless the United States Supreme Court hears the case. So when I stepped into the case in August, had we not appealed, the law in Vermont would be that schools were immunized from liability
I see.
for vaccinations for battery. It was a specific count of this complaint. There would be no recourse for anything other than the Federal PrEP Act under this interpretation.
I
So
see.
we're appealing that.
Okay,
And
so
so
let me stop you and try to restate what I understand. This case has already been brought. It was turned down. You are appealing it. If it hadn't been appealed by you, then currently in Vermont, the law would be that parents would have no recourse against unwitting or against their wishes vaccination of their children except through the PrEP Act. So you appealed. What did AP say was not true? The fact that first sentence, the fact that if you hadn't appealed, parents would not have the right to deny to secure their children from forced vaccination except through recourse of the PrEP Act.
well, to clarify, this is the law in Vermont now.
Okay.
As from the moment the Supreme Court made this ruling, and by the way,
The parents don't have any recourse but the PrEP Act.
no Vermont parents now have any right to sue in this state for this kind of action related to the interventions administered pursuant to PrEP Act declarations, period.
Right.
And
Right.
that's what we're challenging. And
Okay.
to
So what did AP say was not true?
So, in order to highlight the importance of the case, I published articles with the Federalist, American Thinker, elsewhere. And by the way, I was smiling because, yes, I was deliberately dangling a worm and making what some might say is a bold claim, but it's very much a legal conclusion that is incontrovertible, and
All
that
right.
is there is no factual scenario under which a parent who this happens to in Vermont can now proceed. A forced vaccine will be defended by this case, Palatella, and so quickly, actually, Rob Schneider, the former comedian, posted something to this effect on his Twitter account. It started to go viral, and boom, the mainstream media have to combat misinformation like this attorney is stating. I'm
Right.
telling you the truth. And so they ran an interference campaign to lie to the American people and say, oh, no, no, don't listen to that. That's not true. We've even cited the president of the Vermont Law School, and I've challenged him, and he cannot. He actually cites the case.
Right.
He's either deliberately lying or he just simply doesn't understand preemption law. The effect of this case absolutely protects schools from forced jabbing children.
From claims against them for forced jabbing children.
Yes, yes, thank you. From and so the I've tried to counter and show, and in my articles I show, and no one has come back to me, and I've actually fought with AP and others and criticized them. They don't care. They've achieved their objective. They have
Right.
misinformed the American people, and they don't want us to have voices to, like here, to tell
Right.
people the truth.
So did the AP article, which I'm sorry I haven't read, of course I'll go look at it, say that in fact parents do have the right in Vermont to protect their children from forced vaccination, or that they do have legal recourse separate from the PrEP Act? Because that would surprise me, because as far as I'm concerned, no one has legal recourse against vaccine manufacturers except through the PrEP Act for pretty much anything. I mean, it's an uphill battle. What did AP say is true that you think is not true?
AP, what it said was, no, the Vermont court decision did not rule that schools could force vaccinate children.
I
And
see. Okay. All
and
right.
technically it did not, but it's specific. Yeah,
Yeah.
go
No,
ahead.
I've seen those hit pieces by AP, and they never issue a flat denial because that would be inaccurate. So they find something very minor and split hairs about it, or create a Josh. I'm sorry, create a, what is the word, a straw man, or a straw woman, to say, well, he's saying this, and then mischaracterizes what you're saying, and then they go after that. All right, so good for you for fighting back. Don't be disheartened. That really is a good sign that you're being effective. All right. So, and did you reach out to the head of the Vermont Law Society, or this person you're referencing, to say you're mistaken about that, or what's the back and forth about that?
I did, and he ignored me. And
Of
then
course.
subsequently, when I wrote an article about it, I actually approached him again, and he gave me a rather curt response. And so then
What did
I
he say? John, what did he say? What was the curt response?
he quoted the Vermont Supreme Court's case. I can forward the email to you if you wish, because to me this is very interesting. And part of the battle is when you have people who are supposed to be the authorities who become quote shoppers for the
Right.
Associated Press to lie. And
Totally.
what he did is he quoted a line from the case, which, as far as I'm concerned, confirms what I'm arguing. And then he had the dismissive line, you may proceed with your case on behalf of your clients in the Supreme Court if you disagree. And I
Is it
wrote back,
him? Can he
pardon?
stop you?
I'm sorry.
Is it up to him? Can he stop you? Does he have any authority over your
Oh, no, no,
case?
no. He's what he's doing is basically telling me to go pound sand, in my
I
view.
see.
He
I
was
see.
saying, "Oh, if you don't like it, you can go." Finally, I provoked an answer out of him, and of
Right.
course, that really got me upset. And so I then sent him a lengthy diatribe in which I recited the three states in which he's admitted to the bar, the ethics rules violations he's committing by
Whoa.
spreading disinformation about a case, and that
Oh,
got his hackles up. And I said, come on, be a big boy. Admit you were wrong, retract your statement. And he would not. And then we went back and forth. I could send you the whole exchange if
no,
you're
no,
interested.
no. It sounds very stressful. No, thank you.
Well,
Um, but okay, so you called him on that, and in your view, he's committing ethics violations and
in my
miss.
view, he's affirmed my position as well. And there is no construction he can offer otherwise.
All right,
And
so let's now go back to the the harms. You were talking about that. You said there were multiple torts, and that means um, ways someone was harmed. So you mentioned battery, and I think it's very important for people to just pause for a minute and think about battery and other terms that can be part of a civil suit. This is a civil, not a criminal suit, correct? You're not a
Yes.
criminal. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So, so the reason I want you to think about it is people assume, oh, battery, I have to be like dragged into a back alley and beaten to a pulp. No, as you just heard from John Klar, battery is a boundary violation. It's a violation of your bodily integrity. It can have a more limited construction. Tell me what is that correct? And then tell me what the other torts are, please.
Well, that is correct. It's any unauthorized touching, or you don't even have to prove harm of a person's body. We do have rights to bodily integrity. We hear about it in the abortion debate, of course. Um, I I don't know right now that I could rattle off all the state law claims because they're all subsumed in our appeal. But there would be negligence, gross negligence, breach of fiduciary duties.
Well,
I
now,
think.
why is it a breach of fiduciary duties? Because they're mishandling state funds to, pay for vaccination, or because they're getting a bonus? Why do you bring that up?
A fiduciary is one who owes a special duty to the person involved. Fiduciary means trust.
Mhm.
So when you entrust your children to the school, there is a fiduciary duty to take care of those children. So I'm using it generically, and forgive me for not having the counts in front of me. The Supreme Court made short shrift of them here in Vermont by just basically dismissing them, although in a footnote they do summarize them.
I see.
If it would help you, I could give them all to you afterwards, or I have the
Yeah,
complaint here, but it would
yeah,
waste time.
we'll put the complaint in the link. So, are there damages that your clients are asking?
Well, the primary import of what these people have done, because they're not people of means, and that's why I took the case,
Mhm.
is simply to make it so this doesn't happen to another
Sure,
child. So
sure.
nominal damages are not what they're after. What they want is a court ruling that this was wrong.
Right.
And if there was some monetary compensation, well, that might send a message because that's the only thing that the powers that be seem to respond to. But I think they would rather pay them, a couple of $100,000 and get them to go away and leave the law as it is. And they
Right.
have not done that. I really admire them because they have stuck it out. And
Have offers of settlement been made?
I, I'm not sure I'm at liberty to discuss that, but I believe so. And
Wow.
they were rejected. That would
Really?
be.
That's really heroic for people who are not themselves wealthy. It sounds like, to say no to a chunk of money to just go away so that they can be sure that this never happens to another family in Vermont. That's really very, very noble. It sounds very noble.
They
Um,
are.
and so you think that this may be happening. I mean, I've heard stories like this, I have to say. You think this may be happening to other parents and children in other states in the United States? Is that what you're putting the call out for, to hear if there are other parents with similar stories?
Well, I'm pretty certain it is. I've talked to the people firsthand, but as an attorney, we always take things with a grain of salt, and that's why we have trials so that we can have rules of evidence, look at documents, weigh testimony.
Mhm.
I've heard a number of rumblings about it, but I've also spoken to at least three people who relate specific instances. I mentioned one in Boston of a 3-year-old. That one was negligent. They said, "Oops, sorry, we gave your 3-year-old this jab as well as the other jabs. Didn't mean to." So, then how do we inquire into what the motives are? And does it matter whether it's intentional versus deliberate when
Mhm.
you have a battery claim, which can vary state by state? But in Vermont, battery doesn't require a showing of intent.
Right,
And even if it did, could we still proceed on gross negligence or
right.
just simple negligence? These are civil, litigation standards,
And
and
if you
all are foreclosed by this decision.
I understand. And so if you're successful in appealing, and then say you're successful all the way up to the Supreme Court, what happens to that principle? What happens to the people you're naming who were negligent or who engaged in battery or allowed the battery of the child?
Well, doctor, that's an excellent question, and thank you, because it is. The effect of winning at the U.S. Supreme Court, which, by the way, if our writ is granted, I believe we will prevail.
Mhm.
The effect would be that the Palatella family and their state counsel, Ron Ferrara, could proceed back to court at the state level, at the trial court level, which is where this began. And then our state attorney general, Charity Clark, who also is attacking pregnancy centers and TikTok, defended the schools against all Vermont children and took it to the Vermont Supreme Court on a preemption claim, saying the PrEP Act intruded itself between us and the
Mm.
defendants. So if the Supreme Court were to rule in our favor, we would just proceed to trial as originally should have happened, in my view.
And then are you saying the principal would be on trial as a defendant?
As a witness. And yes, the principal and some other parties are specifically named, as well as the state. And yes, we would proceed with all the normal rules of evidence, find out who Jane Doe's and John Doe's and all these people are, and have testimony from school officials and
Mm.
those administering the vaccines and any physicians in attendance to find out what happened. How did the armband get switched? Were you going
That's
to stab the other kid twice? He was
right.
in a different class. He's not even in the same class. Did you not know who this child was? There
Wow.
are a lot of shifty, dubious things going on here. And if we can't ever, well, we never will find out
Right.
unless we win this appeal.
I just want to note, of everything you're telling me, there's so much that's alarming. But the idea that unnamed people could take your child out of class to another location and do things to them, it opens up so many horrors. And I've just been reading the quite self-justifying autobiography of someone named Michael Aquino, who was accused of child sexual abuse in San Francisco in the 1980s. He was with the military, and the child care center was on a military base, the Presidio. The reason I mention it is that the trial, it finally went to trial, involved exactly this scenario: unnamed people, volunteers, taking children out of or working with the childcare workers to remove children from the childcare center where they were actually allegedly by the children and the parents physically and sexually abused, so, and then returned, right? So it's a very dangerous precedent. It's an extraordinarily dangerous precedent, to not know who these Jane Does and John Does are. They may be felons, they may be traffickers, you don't know. And then to put the poor children in the position of saying, no, I don't want to go with this person, or I'm not supposed to have that, near me. I mean, what a traumatic thing. The ripple effect. I'm just thinking as a parent of the ripple effect of this kind of porousness of the children's security, right? And it's going to have an effect on children's sense of safety and their ability to study. I mean, I'm just kind of ranting for a minute. Please bear with me. But I have a 13-year-old stepson whom I adore, of course. And he goes to a public school, and it's in a nice area, and there shouldn't be anything wrong. But his dad literally has to say to him, like, run, bolt the door if they come at you with a needle. What does that do to children's ability to feel safe and to focus on their studies if they are in an endangered situation physically? I just wanted to say that. So let's go back to this very attractive scenario of these people being forced to answer questions on a witness stand. Say you are successful all the way. Does something bad, like is there any recourse? Is there any penalty for the principal, for the Jane Doe and John Doe, if you're successful? Like, they don't go to jail, right? Because it's a civil suit, but do they get financial penalties? Do they get removed from their jobs? Like, what happens to them? Where is justice? What would it look like?
Well, I suppose that would be up to the administrative state. They're all insulated because they were functioning in the course of their employment, so the state would be responsible for any money. What I think would actually happen, by the way, Doctor, is that probably they would settle this case pretty quickly. But still, the decision that stands, the current law, would have been overturned. The Vermont Supreme Court would be overturned, and all Vermont parents in future would have full rights and recourse under state law and tort law claims under state law, particularly, and I think there's a constitutional claim to proceed. And so our clients will succeed the moment the U.S. Supreme Court rules in our favor. Whether or not they then decide to settle, presumably for a more substantial amount, but they would have achieved their goal.
I
And it's
understand.
yeah. Sorry,
But we don't know that John Doe and Jane Doe are state employees. They
we do
could be
not.
they could be random contractors of a third party, or
Yes.
like anyone. They could be they literally could be anyone. So what if they're not state employees? Is there any penalty for John and Jane Doe? Of like how also how is this not a criminal issue too? I know you're not a criminal lawyer, but John Doe and Jane Doe, strangers, took other people's children out of their classrooms and violated their bodily integrity. How is that not being reported to the sheriff or the Vermont State Attorney General? I mean, that is a criminal offense, isn't it?
Well, doctor, I would say a lot of things being done in Vermont should be criminal offenses, including what's being done to children in the name of transgenderism, which is another whole horror story. But the answer to your question is, and yes, I was a criminal defense attorney and a special public defender in Connecticut for years, and I've actually been involved in some pedophile cases, and they are highly, uh, emotional and very difficult to defend against, and sometimes difficult to prove when you have to put a 5-year-old on the stand. But the real application here is employment law.
Right.
Someone employed, whether as an independent contractor, well, maybe not. If they're independent contractors, but we don't know, they might be liable. But generally, they're going to be indemnified by the school if what they're doing is within the context of their employment. Now,
Right.
if a school employee, now some 15 to 20% of pedophile offenders, I believe, are public school teachers.
Ugh.
Yeah, we just, I mean, don't quote me on that statistic. It changes, but as I recall, well, we see priests. So it's often the time the people who are most trusted who most breach that fiduciary responsibility.
Well, but
Absent that,
yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
What if John Doe and Jane Doe are not school employees, as we were describing earlier? What if they're from a nonprofit, or what if they're, the local pharmacist? What if they're not?
Yeah. Unless they act criminally or outside of the scope of the employment, they are still indemnified by the school. In other words, you could still sue them, but it would be the school or public authorities who retain them who would be
I see.
ultimately responsible
All right.
to indemnify them if they're acting within the scope of their duties. If they rob a bank or molest someone, then of course they can be criminally prosecuted, which is
Well,
another state.
they vaccinated the wrong child. Isn't that some, breach of employment law?
It is, but it's civil. For criminal, I would have to show intent. Most all, unless it's strict liability cases like a speeding ticket, almost all criminal statutes require a showing of intent, not statutory rape, by the way, for very
Right.
clear reasons. And they're eliminating that too. They want to give children consent to have sex with whom they want, and minor attracted persons are victims, and all of this craziness is here in the Green Mountains, sadly, in the name of progressivism. So
Um,
ultimately finding, and then of course, by the time we get there, doctor, you might imagine if we did find something criminal, and I don't think we would. I think these people weren't that devious as they were trying to harm the child. They were just whatever their incentives are, or maybe it was a gross mistake. But if we
right.
ever got there and found that it was, well, the statute of limitations will almost certainly have run.
I see.
And so, these are the realities that our clients face, and so do other parents. And I would point out there's another case coming out of Virginia, and it involved a high school student. You mentioned your stepson. I think he was 14 or 15. He was a football player, and he showed up what was supposed to be a COVID test, and it turned out to be they jabbed him with a vaccine.
Oh
I
my gosh.
think that people are more sympathetic when it's a 6-year-old.
Right.
These children shouldn't be put in the place of having to defend themselves from deliberate or gross
Right.
action, grossly negligent
I mean,
behavior.
neither should a 14-year-old. They're all minors. They
I
shouldn't.
agree.
I mean, I just can't get over how many things other than academics children are being forced to think about these days, in a school setting. But many of them scary. But you've covered this very thoroughly. I believe our audience understands what your clients are going through and what they're seeking, and it would really secure the safety of kids and parents in the state of Vermont. Let me ask you one more question before we turn to the comments. If you are successful all the way up to the Supreme Court, would your success have a knock-on effect for other states? Would it set a precedent that would allow other lawsuits to proceed successfully? I think you're indicating that that would be the case.
Well, yeah, and thank you for the opportunity to explain this, because we lawyers sometimes take a lot of these things for granted. So one of the reasons that the U.S. Supreme Court might consider hearing this case is that there is a case coming up I believe in Virginia. I think there's another one in North Carolina. I think that was a North Carolina case with the football player. I think there's another one in Virginia. I believe there's been a recent ruling in New Mexico. Now, at some point, one of the considerations that would make the Supreme Court grant a writ of certiorari, one of the few cases they grant, is if there is a conflict between the states that needs resolution.
Mhm.
And so, at some point there is going to be conflict. But either way, if the court grants this decision or
Mhm.
grants our writ and finds that the Vermont Supreme Court erred and
Mhm.
inappropriately used the PrEP Act to preempt state causes of action, that
Mhm.
would apply to all these other cases. If they were being appealed, they could just stop. They would have won. And
Mhm.
any states in America that rule this way now have the highest law of the land, which is the Supreme Court's decision. Actually, the Constitution is above them.
Mhm.
Uh, would prevail, and that's how our system works.
Mhm. Gotcha. All right. Well, gosh, I wish you well, and I'm glad that you brought this to our attention. Please keep us posted. Gordo Barreto says, so diabolical. You can warn your kids now, stop them. And I agree with Gordo, of course, but these parents did warn their poor child. So, the little ones are really at the mercy of events. My gosh. El Maldonado, hi El, says the state has taken the authority away from parents, taking the position of a parent. This can't be. Parents need to wake up. Very true. Bree says always put it in writing, exclamation point. Also very good advice. I'm sure the lawyer would agree. But parents expressed wishes should be enough, right? It's sad to live in a society in which you can't tell the principal, don't harm my child without my consent. And the principal, needs to have like a certified letter to respect what you're saying. What would you say to that, John Klar? Is it wise for parents always to put things in writing, make sure that do they have to make multiple copies? Do they have to give them to the teacher and the principal and the what? How do parents protect themselves until you're successful?
Well, that actually raises a number of issues. First and foremost, it won't protect you. In fact, school officials who sneer at you for being a vax denier, or some of the families I dealt with during the pandemic who didn't want their children to wear masks, may actually just sneer at you, crunch it up and throw it in the garbage can, maybe right in front of you. If this decision is allowed to stand, it doesn't matter. And that piece of paper really doesn't give you anything. Hey, it's great to let them know, whether it's oral, verbal, as our parents did, or written, same effect.
Mhm.
They don't have the authority to do it without a written consent form, which was
Mhm.
not provided here. And that's something I want to mention for people to understand why this case is so egregious. If, in fact, whether in the US Supreme Court or the Vermont Supreme Court, it was determined that the PrEP Act preempted these state claims. That's not the end of the discussion, and Vermont didn't address it at all. The
Right.
highest supreme law of this land is the U.S. Constitution. And it is already established that parents have rights over their children, especially around medical decisions, and that patients have rights of informed consent. It's a fundamental right. And the Vermont court never even paid lip service to that, didn't even go through it, because if in fact their construction is correct, then very important constitutional liberties are implicated.
Right.
And that PrEP Act is unconstitutional if
Right.
it is not achieving those goals by the least restrictive means. All
Right.
right. And because it would be subject to strict scrutiny. The Vermont court didn't do that. The US Supreme Court would if it
Mhm.
agreed on the preemption. So this is a horrible, even legal conclusion. And so I certainly advise people to take every step, including in writing, to notify people. But I
Right.
have the same thing happening in Vermont with people saying, I'm notifying you in writing that I don't want my 4-year-old to be taught about transgenderism, homosexuality, or heterosexuality because
Mhm.
they're in kindergarten, and I don't want them shown pictures of graphic novels with people performing fellatio. Guess
Right.
what the school says?
Right.
Sorry, you can't even opt out. And then we wonder why people are public school hesitant
Oh
as
my
well as
God.
vaccine hesitant.
Oh my God. So let's end there with Dawid Whitestone saying the whole school system was created for the purpose of breaking up families and abusing the children. I can't say that I agree that it was created to abuse the children. It's certainly gotten to the point where it's facilitating the systematic abuse of children in the ways that John Clark described. But I am beginning to believe that the public school system as we see it now, which was rationalized around the same time that Rockefeller medicine was rationalized and systematized, does have the effect of weakening the role of the family and weakening the rights of parents and substituting this, which is a very Marxist thing to do. My husband, the CCP specialist, advises me, weakening the authority of parents and substituting the authority of the state. I am seeing that, and it's very, very scary. All right, well, how can and Hypnotic Quixotic podcast says it is communism. Simple. Absolutely. And what greater demonstration of communism than to demonstrate to parents that they have no rights over the physical integrity of their own child? It's so demoralizing. I mean, people do that in war when they rape a woman or, wife or a daughter. They're demonstrating the subjugation of the father of the house. You can't even protect your wife. You can't even protect your daughter. It's a classic demoralization technique. So we really should bear in mind the psychological fallout of this and not just the medical fallout, which it sounds like you're, front and center with parents' rights. Final question, I promise, and then I'll need to thank our sponsors and ask people how they can help, where to send help to you. But what are parents' rights? Like literally in a sentence, what rights in Vermont or in the United States do we have as parents?
Well, I would say that they have been established by United States Supreme Court precedents, and therefore they apply to every state in the country.
Mhm.
Yoder v. Pennsylvania, I think, is a famous case by Amish parents as far as whether they could withdraw their children from public school. I believe the Supreme Court ruled they could after K through 8.
Mhm.
Similar implications are here. Well, and there are other case law out there, and I've written about some of them that codify parents' rights to make decisions over their children's medical care. And
Mhm.
this, of course, is just fundamental anyway, is it not?
It is.
And and,
Absolutely.
and so there are a lot of different laws, both state and federal, but there are federal U.S. Supreme Court cases
Mhm.
that prohibit this kind of behavior, and they were just not considered by the Vermont court at all. We are prayerful that they will be by the U.S. Supreme Court.
Thank you so much for this incredibly valuable discussion and explanation, John Klar. So, where do people who are watching this who want to help you send support to you so that you can battle on? I assume you don't have wealthy clients. I assume that you're doing a lot of things that otherwise you'd be able to charge for. You should get compensated. How do people help you?
Well, I'm grateful. But so Palatella Legal Fees is the title of a fundraiser at givebutter.com, because I didn't want to use GoFundMe because they are so politicized. And
Mhm.
it's Palatella Legal Fees, Politella.
Mhm.
And so no, we're just doing it pro bono. I couldn't find anybody else to take it. I got involved to try to find a lawyer, but a lot of our best lawyers are already involved in other similar cases. They're only going to take one at a time. And so I said, if I can't find a lawyer to do it, I'll do it. And so we've done
Okay,
it.
so you guys, you need to step up. You can't just watch. This is such an important case, not just for the family of this poor child, but for all families. So I'm asking you sincerely, go to, say it again, on givebutter.com.
Givebutter.com, but if you just search Palatella legal fees, or maybe Palatella family legal fees, there's
Mhm.
also a short video. You can meet them. You can hear their story there. Share that. The big way to support us also, if you don't want to give money, fine. Share their story.
That's
Share
right.
that video. They
Okay,
get to speak now.
yeah, exactly. You're giving them a voice. I can't thank you enough. John Klar, you are a hero. I'm going to say goodbye to you so I can thank our sponsors. But everyone, please support John Klar and this brave family to protect the children in Vermont and the country. Thank you, John Klar. Thank you.
I can't thank you enough. Thank you all.
It's
God
my
bless you.
Thank you. All right. So let's just, wow, that's such a sobering conversation. And you know what to do. You need to s- spread the word. Our kids are not out of danger. They're going to try it again. Why would they not? And not just, you know, sex change hormones and experimental injections, but every single new product that, pharma creates, they're going to try to get it into our children just to expand their market share. Um, or to injure them, right? Or to manipulate them in other ways. I mean, it's gotten to be so insane, the manipulation of our children's minds and bodies in the public school system, which is supposed to be about reading, writing, and arithmetic. So we want to thank Birch Gold and send you there in times like this. You need to protect your assets. There are going to be increased tariffs on our trade partners, tax cuts, and regulation changes. You've got to learn why gold is a valuable diversification tactic now more than ever. Birch Gold, which is the only gold company that Brian and I trust, is releasing their ultimate guide for gold in the Trump era, forward by Donald Trump Jr. To get your free copy along with Birch Gold's free information kit on gold, text Daily Clout to the number 989898. Here are the facts. The national debt keeps increasing. Our interest payments on the national debt are going to keep increasing, and gold is still your hedge against, pardon me, a weakened dollar. Birch Gold is still the company Brian and I trust to help you convert an existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in gold. Text Daily Clout to 989898 for your free copy of the Ultimate Guide for Gold in the Trump Era. No obligation, just information. With an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau, countless 5-star reviews, and thousands of happy customers, you too can trust Birch Gold. Text Daily Clout to 989898 today. And you need to protect your health. This product has changed my life and Brian's. Native Path's collagen formula, and I'm actually on day 23 of the January collagen challenge, is made with ingredients that are scientifically backed to increase bone mineral density, support tissue recovery, reduce wrinkles, enhance hair thickness, and strengthen weak or damaged nails. Who wouldn't want more collagen with all these benefits? So right now, when you visit getnativepath.com/daily clout, you can stock up on Native Path collagen for up to an incredible 45% off, plus free shipping. Every order comes with a 365-day money-back guarantee, so you try it risk-free today. Do you want to move easily and independently? That's my number one issue, because as you know, I have mobility issues, and this collagen helps me so much without pain or stiffness holding you back. Do you want to look in the mirror and see a plump, hydrated glow and not more fine lines and wrinkles? I am going to turn 63 in November, and I'm very grateful for Native Collagen for just that reason. Discover Native Path Collagen, made with only type 1 and 3 collagen fibers, the two most important types that make up 90% of the collagen in your body. It's found in your cartilage, bones, skin, hair, nails, and gut. And type 1 and 3 provide maximum benefits without unnecessary fillers. It's a single ingredient formula with no additives, artificial sweeteners. It's third-party tested for heavy metals, so it's pure and safe, totally flavorless. Native Path collagen can be added to anything. I put it in oatmeal. You can put it in your coffee or smoothies. Its peptide formula makes it more bioavailable, meaning that it's absorbed more easily and mixes perfectly without clumping. Your body absorbs it more easily. With over 4 million jars sold, 1 million happy customers, 8,000 5-star reviews, and a 365-day no-risk guarantee, Native Path is a trusted choice. Plus, they offer an 800 number for any of your questions about usage or recipes, a real personal answer. You can join their private Facebook community, share recipes, support each other, ask questions. So visit getnativepath.com/daily clout and start that journey today. Join me and Emerald and the other Daily Clout members, commentators. We're all on the Native Path Collagen Challenge, and we're really enjoying it and feeling good about it. Lastly, we want to tell you about Bioptimizers. It's really unbelievable what it does to you to not get good sleep. And there's one phase of sleep that almost everyone doesn't get enough of. That's that deep REM sleep where you restore your psychological equanimity and your body heals. So when it takes me a while to fall asleep at night, I get stressed about being exhausted the next day. But once I started taking Magnesium Breakthrough, my sleep completely changed. And now I fall asleep really easily and wake up refreshed and energized. Three-quarters of the population is magnesium deficient, and most people don't realize that even if they're not, if even if they're taking a magnesium supplement, they're probably not getting enough magnesium because you have to get it in all seven forms. Magnesium breakthrough is the ultimate way to give your body all seven forms in one supplement. So you also really need to know, and I learned this when I interviewed the founder of Bioptimizers, Wade Lightheart. Magnesium deficiency, which comes from the soil being depleted in the United States and everywhere, uh, is also linked to symptoms that are often misdiagnosed, like diabetic or pre-diabetic symptoms, even heart symptoms, dementias, and anxiety and depression. So then you get diagnosed allopathically, you get given medication to treat those symptoms. That medication has side effects, and it's a knock-on effect. So first, get enough magnesium and see if these symptoms resolve. All right, go to buyoptimizers.com/daily clout now. And if you enter promo code Daily Clout, you get 10% off any order. I really recommend it. And if you subscribe, not only will you get amazing discounts and free gifts, you will make sure that your monthly supply is guaranteed. You have to try this product and get the good sleep that you need, and also get the magnesium levels you need to have optimum health and not have a whole cascade of side effects that can be misdiagnosed. So buyoptimizers.com/daily clout, promo code daily clout. Remember, I am not a medical doctor. I'm a doctor of poetry, but I almost died in 2023 in a hospital. I never want to be at the mercy of allopathic medicine again if I can help it. So I take these supplements. Brian takes them. I give them to my loved ones, and we're really, really grateful. And the same is true with diversifying our assets. It's such a relief to know that it's not all, all of our savings isn't in the vulnerable dollar, but some of it is hedged in gold. All right, you guys, you know what to do. Support us at Daily Clout. Become sponsors at subscribers or donors at dailyclout.io. And you can find me on Outspoken on Substack. And you can subscribe to me, which helps me a lot, bring you these independent interviews and real journalism. Take care. I love you all. I'll see you soon. Bye bye.